Okay, so we will continue the conjunctiva. So let's discuss now the anatomy of the conjunctiva. What is the conjunctiva? So the conjunctiva, it is a thin transparent membrane that enclose or line the globe and the inner part of the eyelids and the anterior part of the sclera. It has epithelium that is continuous with the cornea and continuous also with the lacrimal system through the pancreas. It has several parts. We have the palpebral conjunctiva, bulbar conjunctiva, fornices, semilunar folds, and lacrimal caruncle. So let's discuss the gross picture of the palpebral conjunctiva, bulbar conjunctiva, fornices, semilunar folds, and caruncle. Where are these structures are located? So we have the palpebral conjunctiva, which is the conjunctiva lining the eyelid from inside. Then we'll have the bulbar conjunctiva, which is the conjunctiva, the thin transparent membrane lining the globe. The junction between both bulbar and the palpebral conjunctiva, it is called the fornix. So the fornix is like a cul-de-sac or a closed space between the bulbar and the palpebral conjunctiva. There is a semilunar folds present medially to the eyeball, which is called the semilunar folds of the conjunctiva, and more medial to it will be a fleshy area called lacrimal caruncle. So here we have the section of the cornea of the conjunctiva. So here we have, this is the palpebral conjunctiva, this is the bulbar conjunctiva, and junction between both of them, it is the fornix. This is the fornicial conjunctiva. Then we have the semilunar folds. This is a vertical fold of the conjunctiva, and this fleshy part of the conjunctiva, it is called the lacrimal caruncle or conjunctival caruncle. Here is the palpebral conjunctiva, bulbar conjunctiva, and the junction between both of them is called the fornix. Okay, so let's now discuss the different parts of the conjunctiva in more details. We have the palpebral conjunctiva. So the palpebral, we have the first part of the palpebral conjunctiva. It is called the marginal portion, and by saying the marginal portion, meaning that it is the mucocutaneous junction between the eyelid and the conjunctiva. So it is located between the white line, or it is situated between the white line, which is the orifices of meibomian gland, till a shallow depression in the inner surface of the eyelid. It is called the sulcus subtarsalis. This area, this is a very small area, it is called the marginal conjunctiva, which show the transition between the epithelium, or the transition between the eyelid margin to the palpebral conjunctiva, and the lacrimal puncti open into it. From the sulcus subtarsalis till the upper border of the tarsus, this will be the tarsal portion of the palpebral conjunctiva. This portion, as we said earlier, it is closely adherent or firmly adherent to the tarsus, so it is difficult to separate each of them from together. And when you invert the eyelid, it can show the streaks of meibomian glands, as we said before. Then we have the orbital portion, which is from the upper border of the tarsus until the fornix. This is called the the orbital portion, and this portion is loosely adherent, as you can see. So the palpebral part, it is firmly adherent, while the orbital part, it is loosely adherent to the underlying molar muscle. So here you can see this is the yellowish streaks of the palpebral conjunctiva, of the tarsal part of the palpebral conjunctiva, which are the striations of meibomian glands or tarsal glands. Here is the marginal part. Here is the marginal part, which is the junction between, or it is situated between the white line until the sulcus subtarsalis. Then we have the fornix. So the fornix is the junction between the bulbar conjunctiva and the orbital part of palpebral conjunctiva. This part is called the cul-de-sac. Cul-de-sac meaning that it is a cavity that open at one end. So at the area of the medial canthus, it is opened, but laterally and superiorly and inferiorly it is continuous. This part or the fornix is also loosely adherent to the underlying structure. That's why it can show marked swelling in case of trauma or case of inflammation or in case of allergy, as you can see here. So this edema is from the fornix and extending to the bulbar conjunctiva. Bulbar conjunctiva finally, which is the part from the fornix until the limbus. This part, or sorry, this part, it is from the fornix to the limbus. They are divided into two main parts. The first part, it is loosely adherent. It is from the fornix until 3 millimeter from the limbus. This part is loosely adherent to the underlying tenon capsule so that it can be easily dissected. However, from the limbus to 3 millimeter, the tenon capsule and the bulbar conjunctiva are firmly adherent to each other and fused to the sclera. So if you want to have a firm grip of the globe, if you are during surgery and you want to have a firm grip over the eye, then you should grasp by your forceps the area 3 millimeter from the limbus, not away from the limbus, because in this case you will hold only conjunctiva and the grip will not be firm. Then we have the semilunar folds, so the plica semilunaris. It is present at the medial part of the eyelid as a vertical fold of conjunctiva. The free edge is concave and concentric with the corneal margin, and it is separated from the conjunctiva by a 2 millimeter cul-de-sac. So there is a fold between the plica semilunaris and the bulbar conjunctiva. It is very shallow. It's about 2 millimeters, but it is called again cul-de-sac because it is a cavity that is open at one end. Finally, we have the lacrimal caruncle. The caruncle, it is a very small area or minute piece of skin present at the lacus lacrimalis. Here is the lacus lacrimalis, and here is the caruncle, and here is the semilunar folds. So the caruncle is located medial to the semilunar folds, and it is covered by stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. And it has, since it is a modified skin, so it sometimes share some of the characters of skin. Like, for example, they sometimes can show large sebaceous glands or even can show hair. So you may examine a patient and you can see that this area can be hairy. And this is normal because this is one of the characteristics of lacrimal caruncle. And this question has been asked before in the exams, that the caruncle could sometimes have fine hair. So to summarize, we have the palpebral conjunctiva, which is consisting of the marginal part, which extend from the white line until the sulcus subtarsalis. Then we have the tarsal part, which is underlying under the tarsus of the eyelid, and they are both closely adherent to each other. Then from the tarsal to then we have the orbital part from the upper border of the tarsus until the fornix, which is loosely adherent to the underlying molar muscle. Then we have the fornix, which is a continuous cul-de-sac that is opened only medially, and it can be easily swollen by edema or inflammation. Then we have from the fornix until the limbus, we have the bulbar conjunctiva, which is divided into two parts. The part from the fornix until 3 millimeters from the limbus, which is loosely adherent to the underlying tenon, and we have the central 3 millimeters near the limbus, which is closely adherent to the tenon and the underlying sclera, so you can have a firm grip over the globe from this area. The structure of the conjunctiva, it is formed of epithelium and stroma or lamina propria. So what is the structure of each of them? This is not a common question in the exam. So the epithelium has different layers. You don't have to memorize it because it is rarely asked in the exam. But I will just tell you about it. It is a stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. So the free lid margin, the free part of the lid margin is formed of a stratified squamous keratinized epithelium. So the lid margin will have a keratin layer over the epithelium. Then we will have the mucocutaneous junction. The mucocutaneous junction will show again stratified squamous but non-keratinized epithelium in 5 layers. The deep layers are cylindrical, while the flat layers are flat, or the superficial layer are flat. Then we have the tarsal conjunctiva. It has different structure according if it is in the upper tarsus or into the lower tarsus. For example, in the upper tarsus, it is divided into 2 layers. The deep layer are cubical with oval nuclei that are parallel to the surface, while the vertical layer or the superficial layer, the cells are cylindrical, which has oval nuclei perpendicular to the surface. On the other hand, the lower tarsus has a different cellular arrangement, meaning that it has 4 cellular layers. From base or from deep to superficial, the deeper one are cubical. Then we have polygonal, then wedge-shaped, then cone-shaped cells. These are the arrangement of cells in the epithelium of the lower tarsus. Bulbar conjunctiva will show stratified columnar epithelium, and the limbus will show 5 to 7 layers of stratified squamous epithelium. We said this in the limbus as we were discussing the limbus. So it will show an area of transition between the corneal epithelium to the conjunctival epithelium. So the deep cells will show cylindrical cells with large nuclei. Then the middle cells will be polygonal, and superficial cells will be flat with oval nuclei parallel to the surface. Then the lamina propria will show the adenoid layer and the fibrous layer, which will show lymphocytic follicles, which will develop later on in life. So newborns are not born with true conjunctival follicles because they don't have true immunity yet, but they develop later on in life. So there are no true lymphocytic follicles in the newborn. And the connective tissue or the lamina propria or the stroma, it is like a stroma of any part of the tissue of the body. It consists of different structures like blood vessels and nerves and inflammatory cells such as polymorphonuclear leukocytes or mast cells or lymphocytes, eosinophils, and macrophages. Here we come to the most important part of the conjunctiva. Let's say it is the two important things in the conjunctiva. It is the glands and the vascular supply. So for the glands, we have 5 types of glands present into the conjunctiva. So start first with the most important, which is the goblet cells. So goblet cells, is it a cell or a gland? It is a modified gland. So we can consider it like a unicellular mucus gland that secrete mucus secretion. Where is it located? It is located into the epithelium of the conjunctiva. So here is the epithelium, and here is the stroma, and you can see clearly that there are large oval-shaped cells present in the epithelium. Okay, so where it is located, this is the one of the most common questions in the exam. So please bear in mind that the goblet cells are most abundant in areas where there is a cul-de-sac. So they are most numerous in areas of the fornix and the plica semilunaris. And they are less numerous into the bulbar and tarsal conjunctiva, and they are absent at areas of transitions. So if there is mucocutaneous junction, they will be absent, and if there is limbus, they will be absent. This is very important, again, to stress on. that to know where is the goblet cells the most present. It is most abundant in the fornix and the plica. They are absent into the limbus and the mucocutaneous junction, and they are less numerous into the bulbar and tarsal conjunctiva. So by electron microscopy, you can see that the goblet cells are large cells, oval or rounded, that has nuclei which is near the base. So the nucleus of the mucus gland of uh, the nucleus of the mucus gland of goblet cells are present near the base. So this is the structure of the conjunctiva. You can see that this is the epithelium resting on a basement membrane, and underneath the epithelium there will be the stroma or the substantia propria. So the goblet cells are basically present between the basal cells. So the basal cells are resting on the basement membrane, and the goblet cells are present between these basal cells, and where they have the tip of the goblet cell, it is attached to the basement membrane. Then after this, the goblet cell will be separated from the basement membrane and try to arise to reach the surface. Until they reach the surface, they are destroyed and discharge their mucus content. So this is the life cycle of the goblet cells. They start by attachment to their basement membrane and start to ascend, and until they are open into the surface and discharge their contents. So what is the role of goblet cells? As we said earlier, that this is the epithelium of the cornea. We have three layers of the tear film. We have the mucin layer, the aqueous layer, and the oily layer. We said that the oily layer is formed mainly by the tarsal glands or the meibomian glands, and while the main function of the goblet cells is to secrete mucin. So the mucin is the most inner layer of the tear film to the epithelium, and its main function is to make the tear film adherent to the surface of the globe, and it causes the moistening of the cornea. So it will lead to wetting of the cornea and the conjunctival epithelium, and it will filling any corneal defect. So destruction of these cells will not lead to it will lead to a syndrome or a disease called xerosis. This xerosis is not caused by removal of lacrimal gland, but it's caused by removal of the goblet cells. So here what the xerosis looks like. There will be opacification and dekeratinization of the cornea and the conjunctiva, and this is usually occurred due to cicatrization of the conjunctiva, causing damage of the epithelium, as it occurs in many diseases like trachoma or ocular cicatricial pemphigoid or Stevens-Johnson syndrome or chemical burn. All these diseases may lead to this condition. So you can see that the cornea lost its luster. There is no luster of the cornea. This is because of the xerosis. So xerosis is a disease that occurs due to damage of the mucus glands of the conjunctiva. Then the other parts or the other glands of the cornea or of the conjunctiva are not secreting the mucus layer, but secreting the aqueous layer or secreting watery secretion, which are called accessory lacrimal glands. Accessory lacrimal glands, so they aids in the secretion of the watery secretion or the aqueous layer of the tear film, and they support the secretion of the main lacrimal gland. What are these accessory lacrimal glands? We have the glands of Krauss. Glands of Krauss are present deep in the stroma, so they are not present in the epithelium, and the most abundant in the fornices of the temporal third of the conjunctiva and in the caruncle. They are more in the upper fornix than in lower fornix, and they function as accessory lacrimal gland. Then we have another gland called glands of Wolfram. So what are glands of Wolfram? They are again accessory lacrimal glands that are located again deep in the substantia propria, so they are not present into the epithelium, and they are 5 in the upper border of the tarsus and 2 in the lower border of the tarsus. Their function as an accessory lacrimal gland. Then we have some crypts that are not true glands, but they are just folds. These are called crypts of Henle. Crypts of Henle are present and above and below the tarsal plate. So here is the upper tarsus. It will be above the upper tarsus. And here is the lower tarsal plate. It will be below the lower tarsus. So you can remember that they are present at the site of tarsal muscles. So as the upper tarsal muscle is attached to the upper border of the upper tarsus, and the lower tarsal muscle is attached to the lower border of the lower tarsus, then the glands of Henle will be situated into the same location. So it is controversial whether they are glands or not, but the most evidences show that it is not a true gland, but they are just folds of the conjunctiva which are cut horizontally. And finally, we have the glands of Mans. Glands of Mans are present near the limbus. So this location is also asked in the exams before. So the glands of Mans are present in the limbus. And some papers or some evidences doubts that it is present in human beings. So if you have a question like this in the exam, so yes, the glands of Mans may not be found in man. So to summarize, what are the glands of the conjunctiva? We have the goblet cells present into the epithelium. Here, the goblet cells are present in the epithelium, most abundant at areas of cul-de-sac like the forniceal conjunctiva and in the plica semilunaris, and it secrete mucus secretion. While we have other accessory glands that secrete aqueous secretion, like glands of Krauss, which present deep in the substantia propria at the lateral part of the forniceal conjunctiva. And we have the glands of Wolfring, which is present near the upper border of the upper tarsus. And we have the crypts of Henle, which present at the upper border of the upper tarsus and the lower border of the lower tarsus. And finally, we have the glands of man, which are present encircling the limbus. And usually remember that man is not present in man. So man is not present in man, meaning that its presence in human is controversial. Crypts of Henle are not true glands, but they are usually, or they are mostly a crypt. Then we will discuss the blood supply of the conjunctiva. So most of the details have been mentioned in the first part, which is in the lid. So we said that the lid supply is coming from the arcades. So we have the marginal arcades, which are upper marginal arcade and lower marginal arcade, and we have the upper tarsal or upper peripheral arcade. So these arcades will share in the blood supply of the conjunctiva as well as the eyelid. But for the bulbar conjunctiva specifically, we have another blood supply, which is the anterior ciliary arteries. So these are the three main supply of the conjunctiva, coming from the peripheral arterial arcade, from the marginal arcade, anterior ciliary arteries. So how can this share in the formation of the blood supply? This will be different according to the anatomical location of the conjunctiva. So the palpebral conjunctiva, it is supplied mainly by the marginal arterial arcade in the upper and lower eyelids, supplying the marginal and tarsal conjunctiva, while the peripheral arterial arcade supply the orbital conjunctiva and the fornix. For the bulbar conjunctiva, it is supplied by the posterior conjunctival arteries and anterior conjunctival arteries. Posterior conjunctival arteries will supply the peripheral bulbar conjunctiva, while the anterior conjunctival arteries will supply the circumcorneal bulbar conjunctiva. So, again, palpebral conjunctiva will be supplied by the marginal arcades and the peripheral arcades, while the bulbar conjunctiva will be supplied by posterior conjunctival branches which come from the arcades and anterior conjunctival branches which come from the anterior ciliary arteries. Posterior conjunctival artery will supply the posterior conjunctiva, which is the peripheral and the bulbar conjunctiva, while the anterior conjunctival branches will supply the anterior conjunctiva, which is the conjunctiva around the limbus. So let's start with the palpebral conjunctiva. So the peripheral arterial arcade, it is present in the upper eyelid, as you can see here. This is the peripheral arterial arcade, and it is present at the upper border of the upper tarsus. This peripheral arterial arcade will give perforating branches. So here is the peripheral arterial arcade. It is present in the submuscular space, and it will give perforating branches. So these perforating branches will perforate what structure that will perforate? It will perforate the molar muscle. This is very important and very important for the exam that is asked frequently. Which structure that the peripheral tarsal arcade or peripheral arterial arcade perforate? Then it will perforate the molar muscle. So what happened after the peripheral arterial arcade perforate the molar muscle? Then it will give ascending branch and descending branch. The descending branch will descend beneath the tarsus along the whole tarsus, supplying the tarsal conjunctiva and run perpendicular to the lid margin. So here is the lid margin, and here is the descending branch until it reaches the ascending branch of the marginal tarsal arcade or the marginal arcade. So it anastomoses with the ascending branch of the marginal arcade, and they supply the tarsal conjunctiva. Then this is one of the branches of the perforating branches of the peripheral tarsal arcade. What is the other branch? It will be the ascending branch. So the ascending branch will ascend into the palpebral conjunctiva until it reaches the fornix. Then after reaching the fornix, it will descend downward into the bulbar conjunctiva, forming what's called the posterior conjunctival arteries. So to summarize, just to mention that the posterior conjunctival arteries, after descending, will will anastomose with the anterior conjunctival arteries. Here is the eyelid, and here is the ascending branch. The ascending branch will now reflect from the fornicial conjunctiva to meet the anterior conjunctival artery, and they will anastomose about 4 millimeters from the cornea. So to summarize, the peripheral arterial arcade will give peripheral perforating branches that will pass above the upper border of the tarsus and molar muscle. After perforating the molar muscle, they will give descending branches and ascending branches. The descending branch will anastomose with the ascending branch of the marginal arterial arcade and supply the whole tarsus, while the ascending branch will ascend toward the bulbar toward the fornix and till the bulbar conjunctiva, then will continue as posterior conjunctival artery that will anastomose with the anterior conjunctival arteries about 4 millimeters from the limbus. Then the second blood supply will be coming from the marginal arterial arcade or the arcades that are near the lid margin. So they are situated about 3 millimeters from the free lid margin. They are also present into the submuscular space, and they are present at the area of sulcus sulcus subtarsalis. They are made, as we said, by anastomosis between the medial and lateral palpebral arteries. And again, they will give perforating branches. So what structure that they will perforate now? It will perforate the sulcus subtarsalis. So the marginal arterial arcade will give perforating branches that will give ascending branches and descending branches. The ascending branch will meet the descending branch of the peripheral arterial arcade and anastomose together, while the marginal arterial arcade will descend down to lid margin, supplying the marginal conjunctiva. So to summarize, the marginal arterial arcade will give perforating branch that will perforate the sulcus subtarsalis. Then we'll give ascending and descending. The ascending, which is called the tarsal arteriole, will anastomose with the peripheral with the descending branch of peripheral arterial arcade, while the marginal arterioles will run to the lid margin to supply the marginal conjunctiva. So this is the second source of the blood supply. The third source of the blood supply will be the bulbar or the anterior ciliary arteries, which will share in the blood supply of the bulbar conjunctiva. So the bulbar conjunctiva will be supplied by two main sources. The first one is the posterior conjunctival artery. And as we said, the posterior conjunctival artery are the continuation or the branches of the peripheral arterial arcade, which are the branches of the ascending branches of the peripheral arterial arcade. They will reach the bulbar conjunctiva, and about 4 millimeters from the limbus, they will anastomose with the anterior conjunctival arteries. So they are more abundant and more numerous at the peripheral conjunctiva or at near the fornical conjunctiva. And these arteries which are responsible for what's called the conjunctival congestion. So in case of conjunctivitis, for example, there will be congestion of the blood vessels which are more near the fornix. These are the branches of the posterior conjunctival artery. They are most prominent near the fornix and fade toward the limbus. And since they are superficial, they will appear bright red in color, and they can move with the conjunctiva, and they can be constricted with topical adrenaline. Then the posterior conjunctival artery will descend to anastomose with the anterior conjunctival arteries about 4 millimeters from the limbus. And what are the anterior conjunctival arteries? So the anterior conjunctival arteries are the branches of the 7 ciliary arteries. You remember when we were talking about the uvea, we said that we have circulus iridis major, which is formed by the anterior ciliary arteries. These arteries are 7 arteries. There are 2 for each rectus muscle, except the lateral rectus, it will be only single artery. So these 7 anterior ciliary arteries will give anterior conjunctival artery that will anastomose with the posterior conjunctival arteries. Since these vessel or these anterior conjunctival arteries are situated near the limbus, at 4 millimeters from the limbus, these arteries are responsible for what's called ciliary injection. So these arteries are become congested in inflammation of the cornea or ciliary body or angle closure glaucoma or inflammation of the iris. They are deep in nature, so they are appear dusky red, and they don't move with the movement of the conjunctiva, and they don't constrict with topical adrenaline. So these are the 3 main supply: palpebral conjunctiva and the bulbar conjunctiva, supplied by the peripheral arterial arcades, the marginal arcades, and the anterior ciliary arteries. The venous supply for the conjunctiva is different according to the area drained, as the palpebral conjunctiva and the fornix and the peripheral bulbar conjunctiva drain into palpebral venous plexus that will drain into the muscular vein of levator and superior rectus that will eventually drain into the superior and inferior ophthalmic vein, while the area of the conjunctiva around the cornea will form a network about 6 millimeter that will drain again into the muscular vein of the levator and superior rectus that eventually will drain into the superior and the inferior ophthalmic vein. Please note that conjunctival veins will be markedly swollen in case of any obstruction to the venous drainage. So the conjunctival veins will drain into the superior and the inferior ophthalmic veins, and the superior and the inferior ophthalmic veins will drain into the cavernous sinus thrombosis. So in case of cavernous sinus, the superior and the inferior ophthalmic vein will drain into the cavernous sinus. So in case of cavernous sinus thrombosis, there will be marked dilatation of the superior and inferior ophthalmic vein due to stagnation of the venous blood, leading to more stagnation of blood into the conjunctival veins, leading to the characteristic appearance of what is called the corkscrew conjunctival vessels. The lymphatic supply of the conjunctiva are arranged into the superficial and deep plexus. The superficial and deep plexus are arranged later on onto the medial group and lateral group. The medial group will drain into the submandibular lymph nodes, while the lateral group will drain into the preauricular lymph nodes, and both of them, the preauricular and the submandibular, will drain later on in the upper deep cervical lymph nodes. So it will be the same lymphatic supply as the eyelid, and nerve supply will be again the same as the eyelid. So the palpebral conjunctiva can be divided into the superior part and the inferior palpebral conjunctiva. The medial part of the superior palpebral conjunctiva, it is innervated by the supratrochlear nerve, while the medial part of the inferior palpebral conjunctiva will be supplied by the infratrochlear nerve. The middle part will be supplied by supraorbital nerve, and the middle part inferiorly will be supplied by the infraorbital nerve. The lateral part of the superior palpebral conjunctiva and lateral part of the inferior palpebral conjunctiva will be supplied by the lacrimal nerve. This is for the palpebral conjunctiva. On the other hand, the pericorneal bulbar conjunctiva will be supplied by the same nerve that will supply the cornea, which are the long ciliary nerves. This is the sensory nerve supply for the conjunctiva, while there is a sympathetic supply to the blood vessels of the bulbar conjunctiva. So this is the end of the conjunctiva. So any question in the conjunctiva, please tell me now. So, okay, so this will be the end of our the first lecture. So we will take a break now for 10 minutes, and we will continue the second lecture, which will be about the anatomy of the lacrimal system and the vascular supply of the eye.